I was told at a conference I went to that if you stand still for 45 minutes and just stare, people will eventually go quiet. I'll try that later. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to our conference, Making Opening, Entangling Design and Social Science. I'm Mike Michael. I'm one of the co-organisers of the conference, and I'm chairing this session. Firstly, a few housekeeping items. Toilets. Straight over here, turn right, and they're on your right, and they're unisex, so enjoy. The fire escapes, or the fire exits, are where you came in, the main entrance, and there's another fire exit directly opposite, so bifurcate as you run out. As you'll see from the information pack, we have a very full schedule today, so please be prompt in getting back from coffee and lunch breaks, which fortunately will be just out here, and also lunch will be in this adjoining room. Rather foolishly, as you'll see, we've only got 15 minutes for the first coffee break. You have had an extended coffee break already. So grab a coffee and then come back, please. Okay, I think some thanks are in order for the organisation of the conference. Firstly, to the Centre of the Study of Invention and Social Process, to the Interaction Research Studio, and to the Incubator for Critical Inquiry and into Technology and Ethnology. We'd also like to thank the Sociology and Design departments. I'd like to thank Toby, Alex and Nina for helping to organise the whole event. And a special thanks to Jane Offerman and Lauren Sibley, who have done a heroic job helping us to put the whole event together. And of course I'd like to thank our external speakers for so graciously offering to contribute. You'll notice that there's a slight change to the programme, or there's a difference between the poster and the programme. Unfortunately, Bill Morbridge couldn't make it, and he let us know just as the posters came back from the printers. Fortunately, we found a replacement Bill. Bill Gaver has agreed to step in, so thanks for that, Bill. As you'll also see from the programme, we've tried to set it up as a set of quasi dialogues around quasi dichotomies. Do you say quasi or quasi? Is the quasi? Yeah, that's right. Good. And I invited speakers, Michelle, Kelly, Harvey and Bill will talk for around 25 minutes, and then there'll be a short response, reflection, discussion from some local people, Toby, Alex, Nina and Kat, and that'll be for around 50 minutes, so we'll have 20 minutes open discussion. And there's also a discussion session at the end of the morning session, as you can see. And at the very end of the day, Lucy has promised to be diligently listening throughout the entire day. Diligently, she's got a computer there, she's already set to go. If past experience is anything to go by, we'll be provided with insightful, incisive and inspirational comments, so no pressure there. Okay. Just a few comments on the dichotomies that we've developed here. These are quasi-dichotomies, as mentioned. They're basically, well, I should say speculation, participation, impact, discipline, contamination, making method. They're not really dichotomies. They're sort of odd articulations which are there to basically inspire discussion and talk. They relate to each other in quite oblique ways, and they sort of emerged out of previous discussions and conversations that we've had. In particular, a series of seminars, design and social science seminars that we've had over the last 3 years, and these sort of embody our attempts at developing something like common points of reference and terms of practical engagement, which nevertheless reflect our different disciplinary roots. And I'm just going to say a little bit about how we arrived at these quasi-dichotomies, just as a way of allowing them to be opened up and discussed as freely as possible. So that they're there as a way of generating a sort of ability to discuss things, but whilst allowing a sort of collaboration and a connection, also allowing a sort of truth to one's own disciplinary background. Now, for those of you who have some familiarity with science and technology studies, that is a sort of none too subtle reference to boundary objects. Boundary objects, as Lee Starr formulated the concept, are objects broadly conceptualized that are flexible enough to use by disparate actors so that they can collaborate with one another, they can translate their various interests in relation to one another, different actors, different parties, different social worlds. But nevertheless, these things are sufficiently robust enough to have their own sort of identity and integrity. And they serve in a translation and a collaboration across parties and social worlds, whilst allowing those parties and social worlds to retain their own sort of identity. So as social scientists and designers, we can use these quasi-dichotomies as boundary objects to think that we're talking about and thinking about the same thing, when we're really not, or we really are, or both. However, the idea of the boundary object comes out of a very particular type of tradition, which is science and technology studies and a particular part of that social worlds theory. So it's a particular it's a particular disciplinary take on doing interdisciplinarity. It's a social-scientific take on that. And what we've tried to do throughout our seminar series is get away from that tacit imperialism where one discipline dictates what the form of collaboration discussion is with another discipline. So in contrast, one could also start thinking about these quasi-dichotomies in terms of a design object rather than a social-scientific concept of object. Something like threshold devices from speculative design. So we can draw on this to start thinking about what sort of collaboration, what sort of discussion, what sort of conversation is feasible here. Bill Gaber and his colleagues describe threshold devices in terms of gathering information from a home's surroundings to give new views of the domestic situation. Threshold devices look out from the home, gathering information from the surroundings, which support utilitarian but also aesthetic and emotional appreciation of the home's setting in its wider physical and social context and environment. These devices should be seen as resources rather than tools. And you use them to explore the complexity, the ambiguity, the multivalent relation between the home and its natural and cultural environment. So threshold devices allow us to use these treating these quasi-dichotomies as threshold devices allows us to look from our home discipline, whether that's design or social science, engage with complex, ambiguous, multivalent relations with our intellectual and practical environment. So here we have two sorts of modes of conversation, of dialogue, of using these quasi-dichotomies. Boundary objects allow us to collaborate and translate, to make connections. Threshold devices allow us to explore and indeed play. We open ourselves up to certain possibilities and make other sorts of connections. But key here is that both of these operate at a practical level. At a practical level of engagement, or better still, entanglement. Many of you coming here will have noticed at the top of this building there's a tangle of metal. Some of you might have not noticed it. Any hands up? You should not notice. You have to notice that. It's becoming the icon of the college. Officially, it's called an architectural squiggle. And I think this might serve as a sort of motif for today's proceedings. It's a sort of, we're going to treat it as a rhizome. And here I'm drawing on philosophy rather than social science or design. Of course, we all believe in philosophy, so we can all agree on this particular motif. It's a rhizome. And for a rhizome, as it's conceptualized by some people at least, any point can touch any other point and confuse and articulate and generate. So it's a topological, a contingent entity which allows for little moments of connection, absorption, and interaction and so on. critical moments. So instead of any grand aspirations for interdisciplinarity between design and social science that some of us might have and some of us used to have, we can perhaps indulge in what we might call infradisciplinarity rather than interdisciplinarity. So below the disciplines, below the sort of grand aspirations for a sort of major synthesis of design and social science, we have these little moments of connection and absorption and interaction and collaboration. So it's a way of getting or resisting those grand and increasingly loud claims for some sort of synthetic interdisciplinarity, which many of us here are exposed to, and we find ourselves having to repeat in one way or another for various audiences. So what we should be indulging in, I think, is these little gentle whispers of multiple, contingent, exploratory, connective, practical, infradisciplinary moments. Not the catchiest of rallying calls. What do we want? Gentle whispers of infradisciplinarity. When do we want it? In contingent, exploratory moments of practical connectivity. So that's what we're rallying around. Well, maybe it's a start anyway. Having said that, it's not a start really, because a lot of people have been doing this already, and some of those people are in the audience, thankfully. So it strikes me that one of the results or products or upshots of this conference is this sort of proliferation of multiple voices in this rhizome, and I think what that indicates is hopefully a sort of critical mass or a tipping point where the connections between these multiple disciplines, the multiple disciplines that make up sociology and those that make up design, come together and actually generate something sort of more profound, more directive, and also more multiplicitous. So let me finish with a little invitation, happy whispering, and an insistence that you enjoy the conference. Okay, and so that now gives me great pleasure to introduce our first pair of speakers, Michelle Murphy and Tony. So thank you very much. Enjoy.